Hi, this is George from The Return of the King. On December 25th, we have a major convergence of signs pointing to the rapture either occurring on that day or on a day in the very near future. When you look at the heavens, you're going to find multiple possibilities that could represent the red dragon. The color red is a very important clue to one of the aspects of the dragon. There are two entities in the heavens that represent the dragon. One is stationary and one is moving. There are two entities in the heavens that represent the church. One is stationary and the other moves through the heavens. What's going to happen is on December 24th, they will all four form a sign in the heavens that the dragon is about to devour the child of Revelation 12 who represents the church. From Revelation 12, 1 through 5, and a great sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. Now, all the ancient cultures in the Middle East, including Israel, Babylon, and the Arab peoples, had a concept of a 7-headed sea creature, which represented an evil empire that would appear at the end of time. And that creature was known as Leviathan. From Job 41, the ancient rabbis believed that Leviathan was a terrible beast that was king of the children of pride, and that he would make a covenant with many and break that covenant, not to be a servant forever. And we know the Antichrist makes a covenant with the many. And here are the verses to support that. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. Will he make a covenant with you to take him for your servant forever? Now here we see a description in Job 41 of what the dragon is like. And he really sounds like a dragon from this description. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. When I think of dawn, sometimes I think of like a red dawn and red eyes. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. There's our fire-breathing dragon. Out of his nostrils comes forth smoke, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from his mouth. Quite the description of a dragon here that we know of today, fire breathing. And this is from Isaiah 27:1. In that day the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea. And so here we see that Leviathan is a dragon that exists who lives in the sea. And what's interesting here is when you go to Revelation 12:15 through 17, we have a dragon that dwells in the sea, and you see all of this water imagery. It says here, the serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with a flood. But the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood in the sand of the sea. You get this impression here of this water serpent, and he's pouring water out of his mouth, all this water imagery. And then when he's all done, he stands. It's so he came out of the ocean to go after the woman. And then he's back standing on the sands of the sea. And he goes, the woman is Israel. And then he can't get the woman. So then who does he go after? He goes after what we would call the Tribulation saints, those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. So why are we told that the dragon is red? It's for the same reason that the moon is white. Kind of a strange response. It's because the colors have meaning, and the moon represents the church, The moon representing the church comes from Joseph's dream of the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing down to him. The moon represents his mother, she's a wife, and the church is the bride of Christ. So this is just one more confirmation that the moon can represent the church. And in Revelation 4:4, this is what we read: around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments with golden crowns on their heads. And who are the 24 elders? The 24 elders represent the church after we've been raptured and we're clothed in white garments. So that's why God chose to make the moon white. He could have chose any other color, but white is the color of the garments that we're going to be wearing in heaven. So that's why he made the moon white. There's 7 moving objects in the heavens used to tell the story, but only one of them is red, and that's a clue. It's telling us that some point in the future, it too will represent the red dragon. And when is that going to happen? And that time is right now. And that object that goes through the heavens that's red is the planet Mars. Here's an interesting picture that was released by NASA in the spring of this year. NASA spots a dragon on Mars, and if you look at this picture here, you can see the dragon very clearly. You can see here's the head of the dragon. This looks like the eye of the dragon, kind of some crown on top of his head, and then you got his whole serpentine body going here. And then it's also interesting that SpaceX, what do they call their mission? SpaceX, Red Dragon mission to Mars. And if you look at the spacecraft here, you got the little SpaceX up here. Look here closely, you can see it says dragon, and there's a red-headed dragon here on the spacecraft. Okay, next we're going to look at Isaiah 27:1 quickly. Isaiah 27:1 tells us that Leviathan is the dragon in the sea. So in the constellations, is there a sea serpent? And yes, there is. It's Cetus the Sea Serpent. And does the moving representation of the dragon, which we now know as Mars, ever enter the constellation of the sea serpent? And the answer is yes. And then the next question I want to ask is, what do sea serpents eat? And they most likely eat fish. And what was the earliest symbol of the church? It was the fish. And so the imagery here is pretty amazing. You have a serpent in the sea, Satan, who wants to devour the church. Amazing imagery here. Next question, is there a constellation in the heavens of a fish? And yes, there is. It's Pisces. And that constellation, again, represents the church. And the moon also represents the church. And then we have Cetus, the red dragon in the sea. And then Mars, the red dragon. So you've got basically 2 constellations. You've got Pisces and Cetus representing the red dragon, Pisces representing the church, and Cetus representing the red dragon in the sea. And then you have the moon, a moving component representing the church, and you have Mars, the moving component of the red dragon. And that's what's going to give us basically our timing. It tells us when we should be watching for the rapture of the church. Okay, we're looking at here, this is Cetus the Sea Serpent. We're looking at the constellation of Cetus. And then notice the constellation of Pisces is connected to Cetus the Sea Serpent. Notice the band here goes onto the neck of the serpent, and remember it's the Holy Spirit filled church that's restraining Satan, and when the Holy Spirit filled church gets raptured out, that restraint is going to go away. And now this is on 1224 is what we're looking at here, and you'll see on 1224 Mars, the red dragon in the sea, and then we have the moon in the church. We have all 4 components. We've got the 2 components that don't move. We've got Pisces, and then we have Cetus joined by Mars and the moon all on one particular day. This is kind of symbolic of the dragon coming to take out to get the church. Basically, remember, he's a sea serpent, and sea serpents eat fish, and he's coming to eat, basically coming to try and eat us, to destroy us. And so what happens on the next day, December 25th, the moon moves into the constellation Aries. Aries represents the rapture of the church. I'm going to go into more detail on that a little bit later. And then we have the next constellation in order here is Taurus. It's Christ the judge. It represents the tribulation, Christ coming to judge the earth. The moon moves in this direction, so the moon was here on the 24th, it'll be 25th, 26th is going to move here and just keep on moving this direction. This tells us that the rapture is pre-tribulation. Aries is in front of Taurus, and so we get raptured out before the tribulation begins. And basically, Satan is going to be left empty-handed because we're going to be gone. Now, in Isaiah 26:19 through 21, we read, "Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy. For your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead." And where is it? What does that sound like? It sounds like 1 Thessalonians 4. It says, "For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, and with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. And the dead in Christ shall rise first." That's what we're saying here in Isaiah. The dead in Christ rise first. "Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we be ever with the Lord." So you're seeing here in the Old Testament, you're seeing actually the rapture of the church here. The church doesn't exist yet, so it's not described, but you've got the first part, and that's that the dead rise first. And then it says, "Come, my people, enter into your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourselves for a little while until the fury has passed by." And what's the fury that's going to be coming? For behold, the Lord is coming out from his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity, and the earth will disclose the blood shed on it, and will no longer cover its slain. So what we're seeing here, the people entering their chambers, that's the rapture of the church. We'll talk about that a little bit later. It's the wedding and a wedding chamber. And then you have the Lord coming out to his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth, and that's the constellation Taurus. Then we see in Isaiah 27:1, "In that day the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea." And that's going to happen at the end of the tribulation. Satan is going to be bound for 1,000 years before he's released one last time, but that happens at the end of the tribulation. He's going to slay the dragon that is in the sea. What else is really amazing here is that all of these verses are all consecutive too. The picture that's being described here is being repeated in the heavens exactly here. We see the serpent, we see the fish, we see the rapture of the church, and then we see God's judgment. And then now let's go back to Revelation 12. "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child," that's the church, "one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up," the word is harpazoed, raptured, "up to God and his throne." And again, we're seeing that imagery here. Okay, next I want to look at, this is the Revelation 12 sign back in 2017. And back in 2017, Jupiter represented the male child, which is the church, and I believe Saturn at that time, which represents Satan, is the red dragon here. Now it takes Jupiter 3 years and 3 months to reach Saturn, and that occurs on December 21st of this year, and that's going to be the grand conjunction, and that's going to kind of occur down here just past the constellation of Sagittarius. Next, I want to look at this chart that was created by Luis B. Vega. He's got a really, really good website with tons of charts and just tons of really great articles. It's called www.postscripts.org. It's down here. I'll show in the next slide a little more detail on that website. He calls this the Age of Aquarius Astrologically, and we can see the grand conjunction here that occurs. Something that's really interesting here in the lineup here, I don't know if you can read, it's pretty small, but he says, "The purpose of this illustration is to depict the astrological delineation of the end of the age of Pisces and the beginning of the age of Aquarius." And now Pisces represents the church, and so it's the end of the church age, and that's correct. The church age is going to come to an end with the rapture of the church, and then basically the tribulation is going to start. They're calling it the age of Aquarius. It says, to Luciferians, Aquarius is the archetype of the coming Antichrist. So you can see the age of Aquarius, the age, basically the next 7-year period is going to be ruled by the Antichrist, and even the the New World Order, they even understand and they see that coming. Now what's really interesting here is that you see this, there's this intersection here, it's called the Golden Gate, and that's the intersection of the ecliptic and what's known as the galactic equator. And so on this particular day, on the winter solstice on December 21st, 2020, The sun is going to be at the Golden Gate right here. And Jupiter and Saturn, I went and I checked, it's to within an hour. When these are at their nearest point, the sun is going to be right dead, right on the money here at this intersection. And what's interesting about that is that I believe this is when Satan gets thrown out of heaven. And remember that a third of the angels get thrown out of heaven with him. And the angle is 33 degrees from the galactic equator to the 0 degrees of Aquarius. And that's what you're seeing here. This occurs at the 0 degrees of Aquarius. And it's 33 degrees, and a third of the angels get thrown out of heaven. So that's really interesting here. Satan is going to get thrown out of heaven, and that's when he's going to go and he's going to pursue and try and take us out. He's going to try and take the man-child, the church, out. And in what I believe in several days from now, the church gets raptured, and he will not be successful in doing that. And this is his website, postscripts.org. This is article 375, Jupiter, Saturn conjunction. Like I say, he's got tons of really cool charts and really good articles. I think I spent a lot of time reading and studying this article. It's a great article. I highly recommend you to go to his site and read some of his stuff. What we're looking at here, this is the Abraham Accords coin. And this is basically taking a sword and beating it into a plowshare. What's interesting on this coin is to note something here at the very top here. We've got a merging of the planet Saturn and the planet Jupiter. You can see you've got Jupiter here, the red spot, and then you have rings around it. And that's pointing to the conjunction that's going to occur here on December 21st. And then interesting, you have the peace dove here. So even the accord is somehow connected to the conjunction that's coming up here. So that's kind of an interesting thing to look at. And then I'm sure you've probably heard this too. This is from the Jerusalem Post. The former Israeli space security chief says aliens exist and that humanity is not ready. This galactic federation has supposedly been in contact with Israel and the U.S. for years, but are keeping themselves secret to prevent hysteria until humanity is ready. We'll wait until the rapture occurs. You're going to see some serious hysteria, and I guarantee you the fallen angels who are masquerading as aliens are going to show up in short order here. When I was doing some research on the Jupiter conjunction, I stumbled across this article, which I found very, very interesting, relating to the coming of the Antichrist. Jupiter conjunction Saturn will take place on December 21st, 2020. What makes this extra special is that Jupiter conjunction Saturn takes place on the exact day for the winter solstice. This marks the sun's very lowest, darkest point of the year. But the good news is that from then onwards, light begins to grow with the return of the Sun King. It's not all doom and gloom after all. This solstice symbolism is even more poignant when we consider the meaning of the historical conjunction and the fact that it takes place at point 0 of Aquarius. We saw that in the chart before. Jupiter conjunction Saturn should be the great leveler. Jupiter expands while Saturn contracts. Jupiter is the so-called great benefic, while Saturn is the greater malefic. Here we find we're in a battle of good versus evil. Of course, we have seen that played out in the world stage in recent events, with each one being more polarizing than the last. It started with Brexit versus the EU, Trump versus Hillary, black versus white, and now the latest incarnation, mask wearing or non-mask wearing. Of course, Jupiter plays the god of all gods, while Saturn is very clearly Satan. But with this conjunction, we don't have an opposition. Therefore, ideally, we should be blending the best of the two rather than continually polarizing each other. My first instinct about this conjunction was that it had some kind of messianic quality. And you got that right. At best, this should make for a very level-headed leader. However, we mustn't forget that Saturn overpowers Jupiter while he is in Aquarius. So this is not going to play out as the great Messiah that some might have been hoping for. Then she goes on to say, after my findings, I am seeing this as a far more tricky conjunction than it seems to be at first sight. Not only that, but I found that the chart of the Antichrist has both these planets in Aquarius, according to Gene Dixon. Gene Dixon predicted that the Antichrist was going to show up in the year 2020. So I find that very, very interesting that everybody knows something's going down here and that the Antichrist is going to show up. We're looking at here, this is the heavens on December 25th, Christmas Day. And you can see, we talked about this section of the sky earlier. We've got the moon now on the 25th, has moved from the 24th, when it was right here, right between the V here in Pisces. It's moved in one day. It's moved in the constellation of Aries, which represents the rapture of the church. And that would be a great Christmas present on the 25th if the rapture were to occur on this day. Again, you got to remember, and most of you who have been watching, over the years, we know that just because a sign appears on a particular day doesn't mean the event is going to occur on that day. We know that from the Revelation 12 sign. It's been 3 years. That being said, though, one of these days it's going to happen. And this would be a great day, a great Christmas present to the church, to take the church out. It would also be a really very visible sign to the world that, who's Lord. Jesus Christ is Lord, and he takes his people out. And people would see over the years then, they're going to be told that we're really the bad people and we get taken off. So now the earth can, they can do all the things that they want to do. We're the ones who are we're restraining the world from, going to the next level, so to speak. But they're going to see over the next 7 years when things fall apart that Jesus Christ came and took his people out. And I think a lot of people are aware of that, and a lot of people will become believers and followers because, if it were to occur on that day. That being said, God is going to do it on the perfect day, whatever day that is. The next day that I think it would probably be, if you're going to pick a particular day, I think every day is a high watch day and it can occur on any day. But the next day would be like at the inauguration, because Donald Trump, we will all be changed in the twinkling of an eye at the last Trump. And we have Donald Trump, and then we have Vice President Pence, Trump Pence. And so there's something interesting going on there. So at the last Trump. So that would be, if we're still here after Christmas, again, it can happen any day, but that would be another really high watch day. That would be inauguration day if Donald Trump is not reelected, and that's the day he gets replaced. So we're definitely in a super high watch window. Even right now, it could occur before Christmas, but Christmas Day is a super interesting day to have it happen, and that would be really super exciting to be sitting around with all your friends and relatives, and poof, you're gone. You're out of here. Really shock the daylights out of some people. So, but anyhow, back to what we're talking about here. Aries represents the rapture of the church, and the whole concept of the first and last trump that the Apostle Paul speaks of comes from the ram that Abraham sacrificed in place of Isaac. The ram is a type of Christ, and that's what we're seeing right here. So the left horn is called the first trump, and it's associated with the giving of the law on Mount Sinai and Pentecost. The right horn, called the last trump, is associated with the resurrection of the dead and the rapture of the church. So you've got all the symbolism and imagery of the rapture tied up in the constellation of Aries. What's interesting here is that the moon and all the planets, they move in this direction counterclockwise. The moon on the 24th was in the constellation, as we talked about before, of Pisces and Cetus, the sea serpent who wants to devour the church, the serpent who eats the fish. But what's going to happen is the church is going to get raptured out, and that's not going to happen. And then what happens is God pours out his judgment. That's represented by Taurus, Christ, the judge. It's the coming tribulation. And then I'm going to talk about, in the next couple of slides here, I'm going to talk about some other views here. But it's interesting because we've got the rapture of the church all tied up in here perfectly. Over here, we've got the constellation of the white horse, of the coming four horsemen. Sagittarius, the rider on the white horse, is bow is targeted on the scorpion. That's what Joseph Zeiss. That's why Joseph Zeiss believes the rider on the white horse represents Christ, who's going to take out Satan. Other commentaries believe that the rider on the white horse is the Antichrist. And it's interesting because we had both Jupiter and Saturn. They spent the last couple of months in the constellation of Sagittarius. So I think it can probably go both ways, because the Antichrist doesn't mean he's against Christ. It means he's in place of Christ and instead of Christ. And so it's very possible that Sagittarius could represent both. Another thing that's interesting here, I think the planets as a whole can represent, you've got Jupiter and Saturn here, and then you have Mercury here and the Sun. So you have four components in the constellation of Sagittarius, and we know there are four horsemen that are coming. And so these may also just represent the four horsemen, and two of them have left. Basically, they've left the stable and are heading out, and the other two are going to be heading out very, very shortly. And then we have Venus over here in the constellation, which is Jesus, the bright morning star. That's what he tells us in the book of Revelation. That's in the constellation of Scorpio, and then Ophiuchus, and that Ophiuchus represents Christ wrestling with the serpent to keep him from getting the crown. So you have all this perfect imagery here of the coming of the tribulation, the four horsemen That's how the tribulation starts. It starts with Jesus, who he is found worthy to open the seals, and that's the first seals that are opened are the 4 horsemen that come out. Okay, what I want to do is look at here. I want to look at the moon as it travels through the rest of these constellations, because the story isn't over when the moon is in the constellation of Aries. All of this so far is really looking good for the pre-tribulation rapture of the church. And what happens here is the moon is going to move through the constellations, and all these constellations have meaning. And it's pretty amazing here, because it really bolsters the case that what we're looking at here really is the sign of the pre-tribulation rapture of the church. Now, a Jewish wedding, the tribulation lasts for 7 years, and a Jewish wedding lasts for 7 days. And so there's imagery here in a Jewish wedding of the pre-tribulation rapture. In a Jewish wedding, the groom snatches away and abducts his bride. In our wedding, our groom, Jesus, raptures us away. In a Jewish wedding, the groom takes his bride to the wedding chamber, and they consummate and they celebrate for 7 days. In our wedding, Jesus will take us to his bridal chamber, heaven, where we will consummate and celebrate for 7 years. Now, we read this verse before, Isaiah 26. This is the whole, in the Old Testament, this is a picture of the rapture of the church. It says, your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. You who dwell in the dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is the dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead. We've talked about this before. 1 Thessalonians, for the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. And the dead in Christ shall rise first. We see that in this verse here. The dead in Christ are rising first. Then the next thing that happens is, come my people, enter into your chambers. That's the rapture of the church. And then the next verse is, for behold, the Lord is coming out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. And that over here is the constellation. We can't see it, of Taurus, which is back here behind here. Here you can see here's Taurus. And then we have, it says, then in that day the Lord with his hard and great and strong sword will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, and he will slay the dragon that is in the sea. And at the end of the tribulation, the dragon that is in the sea is going to be slain, and you can see the dragon is all part of the whole story here too. So now, if the moon represents the church, and we know it does, there's enough imagery here, even the color of the moon is important. And Cancer represents heaven, and we are in heaven for 7 years. We should see something in the heavens signifying our 7 years in heaven. And that's exactly what we're going to see here. So now the rapture is going to occur. Church disappears. The dragon is left empty-handed. We're gone. This is day 1. The moon now is going to move in the constellation Taurus. On day 2, it's still in the constellation Taurus. I don't think it really means anything in particular. Day 3, it's still in Taurus. On day 4, it's in the constellation of Gemini, which represents the wedding of Christ and his bride, the church. I don't think it necessarily means the wedding is going to occur on like day 4 or 5. What's important is how long it takes to get to Cancer, which is the resting place of heaven. So on day 6, it's just getting to Cancer. On day 7, it's still in the constellation of Cancer, but it's just about ready to leave, and that's about where it should be. If a day is a year, and it takes 7 days for the moon to travel from the sign of the rapture, which is Aries, to the sign of the resting place of the saints, which is Cancer, which is heaven, then what we're looking at here is the sign of the rapture of the church. And I think, without it beyond a shadow of a doubt, with everything that we've covered today, that what we're looking here is the sign of the rapture of the church. Again, it doesn't mean it happens on the 25th. I think it just means it's going to happen within, at the latest, a couple months. But I think realistically in a couple weeks here, and Christmas is a super high day. It'd be the coolest day, I think, for every Christian on earth if it were to happen on Christmas. And so at the end of the 7-year tribulation, we come back with Christ, and Christ is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. You can see right here, constellation Leo. And what do? We rule and reign with him during the millennium, and the moon is in the constellation of Leo. So that's, the millennium is a new beginning. It's the 8th day. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to rule and reign with him. And what do we see? That's exactly what we see here. The church represented by the moon in the constellation of Leo, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And so if that isn't cool, I don't know what else is. That's just like totally awesome. We're going to be out of here soon, people. So get ready. And now what's interesting here too is from the book of Revelation 5 here, it says, "Weep no more, behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And that's the 4 horsemen. That's the first thing. That's what the 7 seals are about. It says, "Behold, I am coming soon. I am the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star." What's interesting, during the month of December too, the bright morning star is going to be shining. And say here's the east, southeast. Will be rising every day during the month of December. So you're going to have that sign in the heavens, which is Christ, the bright and morning star. And it's in the constellation of Ophiuchus. And then this is about, if you remember back in, when the heck was it? It must have been back in September. I had a dream. And in this dream, I was running a marathon race in Egypt with a friend. His name was Steve. I have one of these sport watches, like a Fitbit. I've got a Garmin type. But when I was running the race, the watch didn't work. I go look down. I'm ready to take off, make my little sprint to the end, and the doggone watch isn't working. So I'm kind of basically lost. And I take that in part of the dream is God's telling us, maybe don't look at the calendar. I'm still trying to totally understand that, maybe just look at the map in the heavens. And so what happened was in the dream, this happened like back in September, this dream, I'm running this race and it was through the pyramids and all the sites in Egypt. And then I got lost. And then I eventually found a map. And this is what the map looked like. It was, on one of those maps that's on a post somewhere. And you find the map and it was weird because I was right here and it had this weird V in it. And it took me a couple days to figure out what it was. And I was reviewing some other videos. And back in one of my videos on the Revelation 12 sign, we have this thing called the Christ angle. And so when I saw this V, I thought, that's what it is. It's the Christ angle. I really think it's related to that because it's tied to the Great Pyramids, and this was being run where the pyramids were being run. And you have this angle that looks like this. And then what it was on this particular day, both Venus and Regulus were in conjunction on this day at the Christ angle. And this was 3 days before the Revelation 12 sign. There's that 3 again. But one of the things that bothered me about this whole sign was that I thought, well, this angle should be, something like this. It shouldn't be. Why is it vertical? We're thinking, well, we're going up, we're going to get raptured or something. Trying to come up with ideas here and of what was going on. And so that was the one thing that kind of bothered me a little bit. But I still believe this is exactly what it was pointing to because it was in Egypt. It was a linkage. And so on the morning of October 3rd, then we have the conjunction of Venus in Leo, and this was in 2020. So we were looking at this as a possible day of the rapture, or just if it's not the day of the rapture, then it's another sign that's just telling us that it's very soon. And so then what happened was in some of the commentary on the videos, somebody had made some mention that the V reminded them of the V in Pisces. And so this was the map that I drew. You can go back and look at some of the old videos. I drew this map up that looks just like this. And when you overlay it on the constellations of the rapture, you have this perfect fit. Like here, we're going up, and you see the V fits in here. And it's like a perfect match. So I take this as a confirmation. The other thing, too, is when I kind of came across this thing where Aries represents the rapture, I don't know how I missed this. You're just reading so many different things, but it was right there in the book, and I stumbled across it one day. And I'm like, what the heck? This is, and this is how this whole thing developed here. And so then I asked God on the day that I stumbled across this Aries being the rapture, the church, and the moon in the constellation of Aries, representing. I asked her, I said, okay, is there really something to this, or am I, what's going on here? And so then that night I had a dream, and in that dream, I was at this big celebration with the singers of Hillsongs, and I was having this great time. We're fellowshipping, and it was like I knew all these people, and they knew me. It was really weird. And at some point, I came to this realization that this is a wedding, and then eventually I came to the realization it was my wedding, and then I came to the realization that I was going to marry one of the lead singers. Her name was Taya, and I was really comfortable with that in the dream. And then what happened was, then I woke up after that. And then so I thought, well, there's got to be something significant with her name. So I look up her name, and sure enough, the name Taya means divine. And so the wedding that was occurring there in the heavens was our wedding our wedding to Christ. She represented Christ. It was our wedding, or my wedding, to Jesus. So that's what we're seeing there in the heavens, and that was a confirmation of what everything that happened here. And on top of that, everything really does work out unbelievably well. I mean, I don't think
this here is by chance or by accident. So, you know, the bottom line of this is that we are going to be raptured here really soon. If it isn't on Christmas Day, it's coming really, really soon. You know, like the inauguration would be the next really high watch day, although every single day is a high watch day. And not only that, but every day is a higher watch day than the day before, because we can see the tribulation is rapidly approaching us. And if you take anything away from this video, it would be that we get raptured out here. I mean, here's the Aries ram sitting here, and here's the tribulation starting here, and everybody goes in this direction. God is on the throne. He is the creator of the heavens and the earth, not Satan. He's the one who put all this stuff into the heavens. He did it for us so we could have confidence and we could have peace for those of us who are living in this particular period of time right before he comes and rapture, or before he comes and judges the earth. He's going to take us out beforehand. He's showing us to give us peace, you know, and not to be afraid. I have a lot of friends and relatives too who are all freaking out, and you know, they're, you know, getting ready to move off to who knows where and try and survive through the tribulation. So God is assuring us that he is going to take us out. So, you know, don't lose the faith. Pray for your friends and relatives that they would get saved here really quickly, because you don't want to go through the tribulation. It's going to be horrible, terrible, and painful. And with that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you guys all really, really soon.